Music is the emotional heartbeat of a film. We remember the visuals and we remember the story. But often what we're responding to emotionally is the music. This is why Never Sit Still approached me for the music of Atletico Dallas. The goal here, pun intended, was to produce a sound that belonged to the people, from the streets to the football stands. Because great brand music is not just about making something sound good, it's understanding why that sound belongs to that brand. And that's exactly what this project became. The brief that I received from Never Sit Still was built on 3 principles: community, mythology, and the place. Its brand is deeply connected to the Hispanic and Latino communities of North Texas, where football isn't just a sport. It's a culture, it's family, it's identity. And what made this project particularly interesting to me was the moment that it arrived. At a time where the conversation about immigration was very heated and a sense of belonging and community was put into question, here was a brand doing something very different. Instead of talking about division, it was celebrating community. Instead of reducing culture to a demographic, it was placing it at the center of the story. As a composer, that immediately excited me, because the challenge here wasn't about creating energy and excitement around a football club. It was finding a musical language that transmitted the feeling of resilience, hard work, and pride. When I received the branding assets, one thing that struck me almost immediately, it was that it felt intentional. Everything from the visual language to the color palette felt clear, disciplined, and unapologetic. There was no confusion about who this club wanted to be. The first thing I explored wasn't melody, but it was rhythm. Because rhythm is where cultures live. If you've listened to reggaeton, Latin pop, or any of the contemporary Hispanic Latino music styles, you would have heard a version of this rhythm. It's one of the most influential rhythmic patterns in modern Latino history. Not because it's complicated, quite the opposite. It's simple, direct, physical, and it pulls forward. And for a football brand built on movement and Latino culture, that seemed the most obvious but strongest choice. The other thing that I wanted to pay close attention to was the texture of the sound itself. Because one of the mistakes that people often make when creating music for a brand is focusing entirely on the composition and forgetting about the sound and the production of the piece. The production aesthetic and the texture is a fundamental part of storytelling. When I looked at the Atletico Dallas visual identity, I didn't see something glossy or luxurious. I saw something rugged, strong, resilient, and working class. There was a toughness to the visual language that seemed intentional. And I wanted the music to carry that same quality. So rather than creating something pristine and polished, I deliberately pushed many of the sounds into saturation. Technically speaking, it adds character, fullness, and richness to the sound. But emotionally, it does something way more interesting. A perfect clean sound can sometimes feel detached, too corporate, too safe. But once you start introducing a little grit and texture, the piece started to feel a bit more rugged, lived in, working class, and tough. The saturated drums seemed to hit harder, the bass felt heavier, and even some of the melodic elements carried a little friction. Not enough to feel aggressive, but just enough to feel resilient. Once I had the rhythm foundation going, I wanted to find a melodic identity that felt historical, but at the same time authentic to the brand. I found myself listening to an old folk song called La Llorona. What fascinated me wasn't the song itself, it was the emotional weight that it carried. For a generation, that melody had lived inside Mexican culture as a symbol of memory, identity, and collective experience. My first instinct was actually to sample it directly, but both myself and Never Sit Still quickly realized that it was way too literal. So instead of borrowing the recording, I borrowed the emotional intention and I began subtly reinterpreting some of those melodic ideas and used it across the whole composition. At a point, listening back, I realized that the sound felt like Atletico Dallas. A mistake that I could have made was to create a generic sports anthem that could have belonged to any team. But Atletico Dallas was different. Atletico Dallas had an identity. All I had to do was to reveal it.